and welcome to the Imagination Factory. I'm Sarah,
Like,
and today we are continuing on with doing our refined first page from the door.
this is still your opportunity to, like change things, obviously. Like this
Mhm.
is not finished by any means. If you're working under deadline, you may just have to be okay with this. If you're doing this for yourself and you have the luxury of time, then by all means just keep on plugging away. I would recommend though, that if something kind of isn't working for you or you're really struggling with something to leave it for a little bit,
Yes.
work on something else and then come back with some fresh eyes. Cause I think that, um, oftentimes you get in your own head and it's hard to see like the solution to the problem. And then when you walk away, you'll get, it'll just click. What are some of the things that helped you problem
Mhm.
solve?
Things, I mean, the biggest thing is walking away from it. And I feel like we don't do that enough. I feel like that's one of those things where you feel like just another 5 minutes and I know I can solve this problem. But sometimes if you actually walk away and look at it again, some of those things that have been blocking you in the first place aren't there anymore. And you can look at it with fresh eyes and sometimes immediately be like, oh, now I get what the issue is and solve it. Sometimes you do just have to put it down and step away and do something completely different. Anything that actually removes it from your recent memory so that you can look at it fresh again.
Yeah, I take showers. Like
Yeah.
I find that showers are like something that really help me. I don't know. I come up with some really good ideas in shower when I'm in a shower.
Yep.
Also, yeah, walks for sure are great for that. Sometimes when you're in the like that twilight of almost falling asleep, like
Mhm.
and actually start, you can still kind of think about things, but you're not completely in that dream uh
Yep.
state yet. I find that helps. Although I'll say this, if you're prone to like spiraling, like, if you have a hard time, like,
Yeah.
letting go at night, of, like, an issue or problem, then I wouldn't recommend doing it at night if you know yourself and you're like, "I'll just think about it all night long, and it'll really keep me
Yeah.
awake," right? So,
Well, that's sometimes too where first thing in the morning is great, right? If you're a morning person, you get up, you make your coffee, it's quiet in your house, you look at it again. There's no distractions, nobody to bug you, nothing else, no emails dinging in, and you can actually just focus. Sometimes I find I get the best work done in that first kind of hour of the morning before the rest of the world wakes up, when I have just kind of peace and silence and can fully focus my brain on the one thing I'm trying to accomplish.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody's gonna be different, I think. Everybody has
100%.
different techniques that help them to problem solve. So going back to maybe some of our earlier
Mhm.
shows where I've talked about doodling,
Yes.
doodling is a great way to problem solve something. Like if you're, like one of the things you could do, if you like taking this figure in the center again. So if you're working digitally, it's easy enough to just create a new layer as I just did there. And maybe, on the side or around it, you just kind of like start doodling something out and you're like, I call this um focus doodling because you're thinking about what you're trying to draw, but you're making it very loose. You're not, you're just letting your hand kind of do this kind of
Mhm.
thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm emulating uh the figure that I drew, but in a way where, it's much, much looser. Uh,
Mhm.
and doing it that way may help you to start to see, like you're a little bit freer. It may allow for you to kind of go, oh, I kind of see some of the reasons why the figure that I had drawn, it wasn't working. It was a little too stiff for something
Mhm.
like that, right? And actually, as I'm looking at this, I may actually do this at some point, just because I think it's a little bit more. I could potentially just really quickly whip out some other, like, so maybe this is actually the better one, right? So I'm just doing
Mhm.
this very quickly, uh, gesturally or doodly, if that's a word, doodly do. Uh, so whatever, word you wanna use here, but, I'm looking at this, I'm going, "Oh, okay, this may actually I'm gonna save this for later." If you're working if you're working on, paper, same thing, just like if you're, like, finding just you're constantly erasing something and then redrawing and erasing and you're spending too much time, set it aside. You could always take another piece of paper and doodle out some ideas very quickly and
Mhm.
see if something else looks better or looks more appropriate for whatever you're trying to do. Uh, again, there's all different things. If you're getting really really frustrated, yeah, by all means, walk away. If
Mhm.
you sometimes you're like you get something in your head and you're like, oh, I'm going to figure this out today. I need to I need to get
Yeah.
this off my plate. It's
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
bug
yeah.
me if I don't, right? And so you plow through and you will as I said, then go for the doodling thing, right?
Yeah.
Try to work out like different kinds of uh positions. Go back to the drawing board with it, right?
Well, and similarly with writing, sometimes if you run into a spot where you can't get the dialogue right, for example, you're writing something and it's just like, ugh, this doesn't sound like my characters. It feels stiff. It's not working. You make a note, brilliant dialogue to go here, and you move on. And as you get to a different scene, you write something else. Sometimes it'll hit you and you'll be like, oh, I'm in my character's voice again. I can go back and I can fill that in. But often if you push too hard, it's not gonna get better, it's probably gonna get worse, and you're better to sort of leave a placeholder, know that it's something you have to go back to, go to the next scene, the next chapter, the next page, whatever it is, and just continue working knowing that you're okay to leave that for the moment. I think sometimes as creatives, we feel like you can't move on until you've completed that task. And sometimes you do actually have to stop that particular thing and do something different. And then all of a sudden that thing seems easier again.
Right. Yeah. It's all just um the different tools you've
Mhm.
learned over the years to kind of um figure out how
'Cause
to
everybody
work
has that
with it,
moment.
right? Yeah.
Everybody goes through it, no matter how long you've been doing this, what part of the industry you're in. There's nobody that hasn't had a time where they've sat there and been like, "I got nothing. This is just not working, and I need to recalibrate myself." So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just remember that you're in many ways, this is not something purely in the amateur phase of work,
Mhm.
right? Like, as you can see here, I've been doing comic books for a long time now, and I still struggle with w figuring stuff out sometimes. We
Mhm.
were working on, uh, a comic book page of Leonard and Pip and this, like, frilled lizard that came very easily to me. Like, I don't know why that one was, like, pretty I mean, I kind of do know why it was a little bit effortless. There's something about anthropomorphic creatures that
Mhm.
when some of the rules of it's not that you have to forego, like, anatomy and composition and all that kind of stuff, but some of the rules of, like, um getting something, like, really realistically accurate are a
Yes.
little you don't have to you can make things a little bit more rubbery, and anyway, for whatever reason, it frees my mind a bit more, and so I find like, that particular way of drawing for me is a little bit less and that's not always the case, but it just comes to me a little bit easier. The same thing when we did our Christian County, like, I
Yeah.
came up with some of those characters really quickly, and that's not always the case, right?
No, but you're right. When something isn't bound by reality in the same way, it's it frees you up a bit, right? Because it's not like, "Oh, is this how this would work?" It's like, it's a lizard in a western with a hat. Like, there's not a lot of reality to bind you to it, so you can get away with a little bit more.
Yeah, so, just to go back to what I'm doing right here,
Mhm,
um, I am, so the original one, I'll go back to this right here, um, I wanted to change the angle a little
mhm,
bit. So let's see if I can show it. Like I actually, yeah, I wanted to change the angle. So I have um, Sam, I wanted to show the phone, the 80s
Mhm.
phone, because I think that it'll ground it a little bit more in that time and place.
Yep.
People will know what it is they're looking at a little bit faster. Although I do like the pose I gave Sam in the original one I did, but um, like it's similar. Like it's similar. I'm not
Mhm.
this is still my opportunity to play around a bit and um you know change up compositions, right? So I always think of up until you start getting to more finished pages, it's a lot of it is like um placeholders,
Mhm.
right? Because you may just you may draw the thing that comes to you first and you're okay with it at that moment, and then because you've developed the project more since you've worked on that piece of that
Mhm.
step, you may go, oh, you know what, like um I think I need to change some of this a little bit now because I realize that, to the point I want to see that 80s phone a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more prevalent in the story. So I want to make sure that, you know, the viewer gets what it is. And the other
Yeah.
one, it didn't show exactly. Although I think that if you were from of a certain time, you would probably get it really quickly. But some people may look at it and go, what are they
What is
carrying
he
that
doing?
what's on the
What
wall
is that
there that
thing?
you're holding? I don't get it. Right. So we can't always assume that everybody's going to know what it is that they're looking at. So you have to you have to, and sometimes you may have to simplify, right?
Mhm.
So don't always assume everybody is in the same headspace as you're in, I guess is the best way to put
Which
it.
is a really good point to remember, right? We've talked about this many times, this like you are not your audience, right? You know what you meant to do. You get the joke, you get the reference, but you have to assume that there's people out there that don't, that have never seen a phone that looks like this, that won't immediately know what is happening. So the more we can give them to kind of put it in the place, the better. And then also the context clues of realizing, oh, wait a second, this isn't modern because why didn't he just pick up his cell phone or why didn't he just, text somebody? It's like, no, phone on the wall. And I love the cord kind of in his hand, sort of like you can see that it's attached, right? Which is such a huge difference to even if you have a landline nowadays, um, that is not what you would have in your home.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that you actually do have choices when it comes to um drawing things a certain way where you're you don't have to like spell it out right away. You
Hmm.
can give glimpses of it and then like it's kind of like, and this is a good question I would like to ask you in regards to
Hmm.
writing. So, as an artist, I could have done it where you just saw a little glimpse of the phone, and
Hmm.
then throughout the story, I'm sprinkling more views of it. So by the time the audience has gotten to the end of the story, they've pretty much gotten a full picture of what it is.
Yep.
But my concern with that is, does that take the audience out at any time? So, for example, if you don't give them the phone, that you just don't give it to them enough, uh, in the towards the middle of the story, let's say, they'll be
Hmm.
like, "What is that thing?" And it takes them out of the story. And
Yes.
then by the end of it, they're like, "Oh, I see what it is. Why did they just put that in the beginning? Because it's been
Tell me.
frustrating me, right?"
Yeah.
So, as a writer,
Hmm.
how do you sprinkle in that kind of stuff like the exposition so that, like let's say you're describing a person or a room, but you don't put it all in the first paragraph. You don't describe the whole
Yeah.
room, you sprinkle it throughout. But like at what point, because I've read books where I'm like, oh, I didn't realize they had red hair until like the end. And I'd
Yeah.
imagine them with black hair the whole time. And then
Yeah.
only the writer says, and their red glistening hair. And I'm going, Oh, well, that changes everything, right? So
Well, my feeling on that is it depends how important to the story it truly is, right? I prefer to only give details that matter, right? So if the color of the person's hair doesn't really matter to the story or to anything else, I might not include it. I might not be specific that they had red glistening hair unless that ends up being important to know, right? Whereas I'm like, you know what, if you want to picture them with black hair, blonde hair, blue hair, whatever, if it doesn't really matter, that's okay. But if it's something that's going to be important, like, something to do with something big that's gonna be revealed or, something about someone wanting to steal her beautiful red hair, etcetera, then I would probably include that earlier versus later because, like you just said, there you start to paint a picture in your mind, right? If it's just words of what you're expecting it to look like. And if suddenly you kind of sledgehammer in a detail that was not in your vision of this person and it's important, that can be jarring and off-putting to the reader that's now like, "Whoa, wait a second. That is not who this person is. They never had red hair. That's crazy." But you also don't wanna spend 2 pages explaining what a room looks like, right? Like, when they turned to their left, there was a shelf with 12 books on it, right? Like, that also is not enjoyable to the reader as well. So, I think the important thing is giving information that's vital to the storytelling as early as possible, and then sprinkling other bits throughout to keep it interesting and continue building up the world, but not front loading it to the point that people are like, I can't even read this anymore. It's been 3 pages of description or exposition, because that also is a really good way to take people completely out of your story.
right. So I guess what you're saying is you're okay if you were to describe, the person's full features, but at the
Mhm.
end, but it's not important to the story that like, you're okay that, like, let's say now the person's like, "Oh, I didn't realize they had like, an earring in
Yeah,
their
and I probably
nose."
wouldn't even bother, to be honest. I wouldn't probably include that at the end. I would just, give enough that you can picture what I need you to picture, right? So if it's like that they were incredibly tall and that's important, I would mention that. But whether they had black or red hair, unless it mattered, I probably wouldn't throw it in unless it
Mm,
was just a quick sort of one line of being like, their dark hair caught the light, done. But I also am one for I prefer not over describing things
mm,
to readers. I prefer letting people make a mental picture that they see fit and only including things that are important to the story versus being like, you must picture this person to look exactly like this. It's like, no, they were middle aged with light hair and a big smile. Okay, great. That's all I need to know about them.
right. That's interesting. I've always, like, when it comes to writing, prose, I
Mhm,
always find it kind of interesting, like, um, how much you're supposed to describe in the scene and the person and how much of it you wanna leave to the audience, like,
mhm,
obviously, you know, if you don't if you're letting the audience imagine those characters a certain way, everybody's gonna have a slightly different view of what the character looks like, right? And
mhm,
that's kind of interesting to me. I just read a book where I had to keep on changing the way I thought that the main character looked physically, and not because I mean, there were parts of, like, the way that the character was described throughout the book. It's not that they changed, it's just that they gave more information, a little
mhm,
bit more information, and not necessarily, like, super specific, but, like, I went from thinking the character was maybe not, like, was not strong physically, but
mhm.
then all of a sudden, towards the end, they were mentioned, like, they can do, like, they
They're
can do
lifting
marine style
boulders.
push-ups,
Yeah,
and I'm going, "Oh, well, now that changes the way that I might look at the way,"
yep,
but it wasn't anything that I don't think it was that the writer did it incorrectly. I just think that the writer was giving that they had been consistent with the character all along. It's just a new piece of information that
yeah,
in my mind changed because they hadn't described the character in super detail throughout the book. So
yeah,
yeah, it went from like me thinking that the character was kind of like like, I don't know, floopy, like, not, like,
It's like,
soft
"Wait a
to
second."
but
Yeah.
now they're like, "Oh, no, they're a little bit more hard, a little bit
Yeah.
maybe still stocky." Maybe stocky went from, like, kinda like the soft pillowy to stocky, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting too because odds are if you were thinking of them being that way, there was probably some clues in there that led you down that road to think that that person was more that whether it be their personality or, because you start to fill in things from inference, right? So if it's like that they were a little nervous or they were shy, you generally are like, oh, they probably weren't a big hulking presence, just because those traits tend to be opposite to each other. And sometimes that's what happens is that you can describe certain things that help to answer other things. And sometimes it really doesn't matter how you picture them looking.